Admiral Kethvar sat in his big chair on the bridge of his warship, looking at the computer screen that showed 12 tiny ships floating in space. These ships looked old and beaten up, like someone had found them in a junkyard. He couldn't help but laugh. The ships were sitting right at the edge of what everyone called the neutral zone, a place where no one was supposed to own anything. But Kethvar didn't care much about rules when it came to weak-looking targets. "Sir, those ships are just sitting there doing nothing," said his tactical officer, a young Zephyrian who was trying hard to impress his boss. "Our scanners show they're running on very low power. The metal they're made of looks pretty basic too, nothing fancy." Kethvar made a sound that was half laugh, half growl. His lizard-like face twisted into what passed for a smile among his people. 12 ships? That's what they call a fleet these days? He waved his clawed hand at the hologram floating in front of him. "I've seen pirate gangs with more ships than that. Maybe they're just some poor refugees running away from a planet that got destroyed." All around the bridge, his crew members looked at each other and smirked. They had every right to feel superior. In their part of the galaxy, real warships were massive. Some of them were so big you could fit entire cities inside them. A proper battle group had hundreds of ships, not just 12 tiny ones that looked like they might fall apart if you sneezed on them. These little ships were so pathetic that Kethvar almost felt sorry for whoever was flying them. Almost. "Turn on the communication system," Kethvar ordered, settling back in his chair like a king about to address some peasants. "Let's see what these little bugs want from us." The big screen in front of him lit up, and suddenly he was looking at a human face. The man had short black hair that was neatly combed, and dark eyes that seemed way too calm for someone who was facing down a Zephyrian war fleet. He wore a simple grey uniform that didn't have any fancy decorations or badges on it. To Kethvar, he looked like a nobody. "I am Captain Lee Hyun of the Terran vessel called Quiet Dawn," the human said in a steady voice. "We're asking for permission to pass through this area of space safely." Kethvar's jaw made a clicking sound, the way his people laughed. "Terran? I've never heard of any place called Terra in my entire life." He leaned forward, trying to look intimidating. "This is Zephyrian space, little captain. You need to tell me exactly what you're doing here, or my soldiers are going to come aboard your ships and find out for themselves." The human captain's face didn't change at all. He didn't look scared, angry, or even worried. "We're just traveling through your space to get somewhere else. We want to go to a place that's past your territory." Kethvar felt his temper starting to rise. This human was way too calm for his own good. "Listen here, Bug. Everything is past someone's territory. The real question is whether you and your friends in those rust buckets are going to live long enough to get there." The Admiral expected the human to start begging or at least show some fear. Instead, Captain Lee Hyun just looked at him with those same calm, dark eyes. It was like the human was studying him, figuring him out. That made Kethvar even angrier. Behind the Admiral, his crew was getting excited. They hadn't had a good fight in weeks, and these small ships looked like they would be easy targets. Some of the younger officers were already thinking about the stories they would tell later about how they destroyed an entire enemy fleet. But something about the human captain bothered Kethvar. The man was too quiet, too confident. People who were about to die usually acted differently. They begged, they cried, they tried to make deals. This Captain Lee Hyun was doing none of those things. "You know what?" Kethvar said, his voice getting louder. "I don't like your attitude, human. I don't like the way you're looking at me like you're not afraid. And I really don't like the way you think you can just fly through my space without paying me the respect I deserve." The human captain tilted his head slightly, like he was listening to something far away. "Admiral Kethvar, we have no wish to fight with you or your people. We're simply trying to get home." "Home?" Kethvar laughed so hard that spit flew from his mouth. "Those 12 pieces of junk are going to take you home? Through Zephyrian space? Without paying tribute? Without bowing down to the mighty Zephyrian Empire?" He stood up from his chair, his full 7-foot height making him look even more threatening. "I don't think so, little human. I really don't think so." Captain Lee Hyun looked at the alien admiral on his screen, studying the creature's scaly green skin and yellow eyes that reminded him of a snake. The Zephyrian looked angry, but Lee had seen angry aliens before. Behind him, on the bridge of the Quiet Dawn, his crew was working like a well-oiled machine. Nobody was panicking or running around. They all knew their jobs and did them quietly. Park. So Jin, his navigation officer, was keeping track of exactly where they were in space and watching the big alien ships that were slowly moving closer to them. She was one of the best pilots Lee had ever worked with, and right now her fingers were dancing over her control panel, calculating escape routes just in case things went bad. Kim Tae-ho, who handled all their communications, was listening to every radio signal the aliens were sending. His job was to make sure they knew what the enemy was planning before the enemy actually did it. Kim was young, but he was smart and fast with computers. "Admiral Kethvar," Lee said in his most polite voice, "we really don't want to fight with you or anyone else in your empire. All we want is to travel to the edge of the galaxy." The alien admiral's eyes got thin and mean-looking. "The edge? You mean the rim?" He sounded confused and suspicious. "There's nothing out there except empty space and death. Why would anyone want to go to such a terrible place?" Lee kept his face completely calm. "That's our business to worry about." This answer made the admiral even more angry. Lee could see the creature's claws tapping against his chair. "Listen here, human. You're going to let my people search your ships, and you're going to pay me 10,000 galactic credits for the privilege of flying through my space. If you say no, I'm going to treat you like enemies." Lee looked over at Lieutenant Commander Choi Min-ho, his tactical officer, the man in charge of weapons and fighting. Choi was a serious guy who never smiled much, but he was the best fighter Lee knew. Right now, Choi shook his head just a tiny bit, so small that only Lee noticed it. It was their secret signal that meant, "Don't give in." "We can't do what you're asking," Lee said, still sounding perfectly calm and polite. "Can't?" The alien admiral leaned forward, his voice getting louder. "Or won't?" "Both," Lee answered. His fingers tapped once on the arm of his captain's chair, a nervous habit he'd had since he was young. "Look, we're willing to change our path so we don't go near your important shipping routes or planets, but we won't let you search our ships, and we won't pay you money." The alien's laugh sounded like metal being scraped against metal. It was an awful sound that made everyone on the human bridge wince a little. "You think you can refuse me? You've got 12 tiny little ships, and I've got the entire Zephyrian fleet backing me up. You're either very brave or very stupid." Lee smiled just a little bit. Sometimes the smallest key can open the biggest lock. The alien admiral stared at him for a long moment, trying to figure out what that meant. Lee could see the creature was getting frustrated. Most people either begged for mercy or started shooting by now. But Lee and his crew were doing neither. What the alien didn't know was that Lee's people had been preparing for this kind of meeting for a very long time. Every person on his bridge had trained for years to handle situations exactly like this one. They looked calm because they were calm. They had a plan, and they were ready to use it if they had to. Park Soo-jin quietly updated their position and kept tracking the alien ships. Kim Tae-ho continued listening to enemy communications. Choi Min-ho watched his weapon systems, ready to act if the admiral decided to attack, and Captain Lee Hyun sat in his chair, looking completely relaxed while he stared down one of the most powerful military commanders in this part of the galaxy. He knew something that Admiral Kethvar didn't know yet. These 12 tiny ships were not what they appeared to be. Deep inside the quiet dawn, in a room filled with humming machines and blinking lights, Chief Engineer Yoon Ji-woo was watching her computer screens very carefully. She was making sure that their ship's power systems were running exactly the way they were supposed to. But there was something special about what she was doing, something the aliens outside couldn't see. To any ship that tried to scan them, the quiet dawn looked like it was barely running. The energy readings showed almost nothing, just enough. Power to keep the lights on and the air flowing. This was exactly what Yoon Ji-woo wanted them to see. Hidden deep in the ship's belly were special devices called quantum dampeners, and they were working perfectly. These machines were hiding the ship's real power, making it look weak when it was actually incredibly strong. Yoon Ji-woo smiled as she checked her readings. Everything was going according to plan. The aliens thought they were looking at helpless refugees, but they had no idea what they were really dealing with. Up on the bridge, Kim Tae-ho was getting busier by the minute. His communication equipment was lighting up like a Christmas tree as more and more alien ships started sending them angry messages. "Captain," Kim Tae-ho said, looking up from his station, We're getting calls from lots of different Zephyrian ships now. They're all telling us to give up right away. Captain Lee Hyun nodded like he had expected this. Send them our flight plan on every radio frequency we have. Make sure they can see that we're planning to stay away from their planets and their trade routes. Suddenly a big three-dimensional map appeared in the air in front of them, showing stars and planets and the paths that ships usually took through space. A bright line showed exactly where the human ships planned to go. A long curved path that went around everything important, staying far away from any place where people lived or worked. Meanwhile, on the big Zephyrian warship, Admiral HFY was staring at the same map that the humans had just sent him. But instead of being happy that they were trying to avoid trouble, he was getting more and more angry. "Look at this," he snarled, pointing at the holographic display. "They think they can tell us where they're going to fly? They think they can make their own rules in my space and expect us to just say, 'Thank you very much'?" Commander Vextar, who was the Admiral's second-in-command, leaned closer to look at the map. He was a more careful thinker than his boss. "Sir, if you look at their route, they really are staying away from all our important stuff. Maybe we should think about letting them—" "Maybe nothing!" HFY shouted so loud that everyone on the bridge jumped. His face was turning a darker shade of green, which meant he was really furious. "Nobody, and I mean nobody, flies through space that belongs to the Zephyrian Empire without asking me first. I don't care if they promise to tiptoe around our planets." He spun around to face his fleet commander, a tough-looking alien who controlled the movement of all their warships. "Send a message to the 3rd Heavy Squadron. Tell them to move to intercept those human ships. If these Terrans think they can play games with us, we'll teach them what happens when you mess with the Zephyrian Empire." Back on the human ship, Lieutenant Commander Choi Min-ho was watching his tactical display when he saw something that made his blood run cold. 3 huge shapes were moving on his screen, enemy warships that were much, much bigger than anything in the human fleet. "Captain," Choi Min-ho said, his voice steady despite what he was seeing, 3 of their heavy cruisers just broke away from the main group. They're heading straight for us." Captain Lee Hyun let out a long, sad sigh. He had really hoped it wouldn't come to this. "Send a signal to all our ships. Tell them to get ready for defensive protocols." Navigator Park Soo-jin looked worried. "Sir, should we change course? Maybe we can still avoid a fight." "No," Lee said quietly, but there was something hard in his voice now. "We gave them every chance to let us pass peacefully. We showed them we weren't trying to cause trouble. Now we do what we came here to do." The bridge got very quiet as everyone realized what was about to happen. The 3 massive Zephyrian warships called Dominion's Fist, Star Render, and Crushing Victory slowly moved into position like giant metal predators getting ready to pounce. These ships were absolutely enormous. Each one was easily 10 times bigger than any of the human vessels. Their dark hulls were covered with rows and rows of weapons, plasma cannons that could melt through solid steel, and torpedo launchers that could fire explosive missiles faster than the speed of sound. To anyone watching from far away, it looked like 3 elephants getting ready to stomp on 12 mice. A cold mechanical voice came crackling over the radio from the lead alien ship. "Unknown vessels, this is your final warning. Turn off your engines right now and get ready for our soldiers to come aboard your ships. If you don't obey, we will destroy you." Captain Lee Hyun slowly stood up from his captain's chair. The moment had finally come, the moment he and his crew had been training for during their long journey through empty space. All around him on the bridge, his people were getting ready for what everyone knew was about to happen. Weapons Officer Lee. So Young's hands moved quickly over her control panel, turning on systems that had been sleeping quietly since they left their home. These were weapons and defenses that the aliens had never seen before, technology that had been kept hidden and secret for exactly this kind of situation. Down in the engine room, Chief Engineer Yoon-ji Woo started pressing buttons and flipping switches in a careful sequence. What she was doing would change their ships from what looked like old beat-up cargo vessels into something completely different, something that would shock and terrify their enemies. Captain Lee Hyun pressed a button on his chair and spoke into his microphone, sending his voice to every ship in the area, both human and alien. "This is Captain Lee Hyun of the Terran Deep Survey Fleet. We are the advanced scouts of the Terran hegemony. We came here hoping to avoid a fight, but if you attack us, we will defend ourselves. This is your final warning. From the alien flagship, Admiral Kethvar's horrible laughter filled the radio waves. Terran hegemony, advanced scouts, are you trying to tell me there are more ships like those pieces of junk you're flying? Yes, Captain Lee answered, his voice calm and steady. Many more. Kethvar's laughter got even louder and more nasty. Well then, I guess we'll have plenty of target practice today. All ships, open fire. Show these primitive humans what happens when they dare to challenge the mighty Zephyrian Empire. What happened next was like watching the most spectacular fireworks show in the universe, except these fireworks were designed to kill. The space between the two fleets suddenly exploded with light and color as the alien ships opened fire with everything they had. Bright blue plasma bolts streaked through the darkness like shooting stars, while massive torpedoes raced toward the human ships, trailing fire behind them. The Zephyrian crews were already celebrating in their heads. They had done this many times before. Small groups of ships that thought they could stand up to the Empire always ended the same way. In a few minutes, there would be nothing left but floating wreckage and the screams of the defeated. But what the aliens didn't know was that the humans had been waiting for this moment. Every person on every human ship knew exactly what to do. They had practiced this scenario hundreds of times during their long journey home. The aliens thought they were about to destroy 12 helpless refugees. They were about to learn how wrong they were. As the alien weapons raced toward them through space, the human ships began to change. Their hulls started shifting and moving in ways that should have been impossible. Hidden panels slid open to reveal weapons that didn't exist in any alien database. The ships that had looked old and slow suddenly became something else entirely. The real fight was about to begin. What happened in the next 30 seconds would go down in galactic history as one of the most shocking battles ever fought. Years later, military historians would call it the 30-second war, because that's exactly how long it took for everything to change. As the alien plasma bolts and torpedoes raced through space toward the human ships, something incredible happened. The 12 vessels that had looked old and helpless suddenly moved faster than anything that size should be able to move. It was like watching a group of sleeping tigers suddenly wake up and show their claws. The hulls of the human ships began to change right before everyone's eyes. Metal plates slid apart, revealing hidden compartments filled with weapons that no one had ever seen before. What had looked like simple cargo ships carrying refugees transformed into sleek, deadly war machines that seemed to come from science fiction movies. On the bridge of the Quiet Dawn, Weapons Officer Lee So-young's hands moved across her control panel like she was playing a piano. "Quantum disruptors are ready to fire," she reported in a calm voice. "I'm targeting the lead enemy ship's main power source." The Quiet Dawn suddenly spun and rolled through space in a way that should have been impossible for something so big. It dodged every single plasma bolt that the aliens had fired at it, moving like a dancer, avoiding raindrops. At the same time, it fired back with beams of pure energy that cut through space like invisible swords. These energy beams were unlike anything the aliens had ever seen. They sliced through the hull of the Dominion's fist with surgical precision, cutting away all of its weapons while leaving the rest of the ship intact. It was like watching a master chef carefully removing the bones from a fish. Back on the alien flagship, Admiral Kethvar was screaming at his control panels. "This is impossible. Where did those weapons come from? Our sensors didn't detect anything." Like that, Commander Vextar was staring at his computer screen with his mouth hanging open. "Sir, the energy readings from their ships are going higher than our equipment can even measure. These aren't the same ships we scanned before. Something has changed, something big." The second alien warship, Starrender, tried to turn its massive guns toward the human fleet, but it was like trying to swat flies with a baseball bat. The human ships moved together like a school of fish, each one knowing exactly where the others were going, without having to talk to each other. Suddenly, Captain Park Soo-jin's ship called Silent Thunder appeared behind the Starrender, like it had just teleported there. 1 second it was in front of the alien ship, and the next second it was behind it, firing weapons that shut down all the alien ship's systems in an instant. Temporal displacement drives working perfectly. Park Soo-jin reported to Captain Lee Hyun, her voice as calm as if she was ordering coffee. The enemy ship is completely disabled. In less than 30 seconds, 2 of the 3 massive alien warships were floating helplessly in space like giant metal coffins. Their weapons were gone, their engines were dead, and their crews were sitting in the dark wondering what had just happened to them. The third ship, crushing Victory, didn't stick around to find out. It turned and ran away as fast as its engines could carry it, while its captain screamed into his radio, "This is Commander Heztar calling all Zephyrian ships. The humans have technology that shouldn't exist. I repeat, these Terrans are not what we thought they were. They're something else. Entirely." As the alien ship disappeared into the distance, Captain Lee Hyun's voice followed it across all the radio frequencies in the area. His words were calm, but carried a warning that chilled everyone who heard them. "We came to you in peace. You chose to make war. What you just saw was us holding back. Consider yourselves lucky that we believe in mercy." The battle was over almost before it had begun, but its effects would ripple across the entire galaxy. Deep underground on a planet called Nexus Prime, in the most secret building of the Galactic Council, an intelligence analyst named Vel Nara was having the worst day of her career. She was sitting in front of a massive computer, desperately searching through hundreds of years of old records, trying to figure out who these mysterious humans really were. Her 6-fingered hands were flying across the keyboard as she typed commands into the computer. "Search all historical files for any mention of Terra, Terran, or human," she told the machine, her voice shaking slightly. The computer began pulling up bits and pieces of information. Old reports that had been sitting in digital storage for centuries, gathering electronic dust. Most of these reports had been dismissed as made-up stories or the crazy ramblings of space explorers who had spent too much time alone in the darkness between stars. But as Velnara started putting all these fragments together, she began to see a pattern that made her blood run cold. "Director Quintar," she called out across the intelligence center, "you need to come look at this right now." The old Nexari director shuffled over to her workstation. He was ancient even by his species standards, with grey skin and 4 yellow eyes that blinked one at a time in a slow rhythm. "What did you find, Velnara?" "I found references to a species called humans that go back 800 years, she said, her voice getting more excited and worried at the same time. "According to these old reports, they came from a planet called Earth in something called the Sol System, but their homeworld got destroyed by some kind of environmental disaster that made it impossible to live there." Director Quintar's 4 eyes focused on her computer screen. "Go on." "The last time anyone officially saw them was 782 years ago. A huge fleet of refugee ships was spotted heading toward the edge of the galaxy, toward the empty space beyond, the rim where nothing exists. Everyone assumed they died out there in the void." The director's mandibles, the insect-like mouthparts of his species, started clicking together nervously. "Is it possible they could have survived out there for all this time?" Velnara pulled up more files on her screen. "Sir, if even half of these old reports are true, the humans were already showing incredible technological abilities before they left our galaxy. 800 years of being forced to survive in the harshest conditions imaginable, having to adapt or die." Her voice got quieter as she realized what she was saying. "What kind of abilities?" the director asked, though he was starting to look like he didn't want to know the answer. "Rapid technological advancement that was faster than any other species on record. They could solve problems that other races couldn't figure out in centuries. But here's the really scary part. They had a documented ability to take apart any technology they found, and not only understand how it worked, but make it better." Director Quintar's 4 eyes now focused on another screen that was showing the recorded footage from the battle with the Zephyrian ships. The video showed those 12 small human vessels turning into deadly war machines in a matter of seconds. "How many ships did they have when they left our galaxy?" he asked quietly. Velnara scrolled through more data. "The records aren't very clear because it happened so long ago, but the estimates suggest somewhere between 10,000 and 50,000 vessels." The intelligence center got very quiet. The only sound was the humming of computers and the soft breathing of the 2 aliens as they stared at the screens in front of them. Finally, Velnara broke the silence with a question that changed everything. Director, what if we've been thinking about this all wrong? What if this isn't first contact with a new alien species? What if this is something much more dangerous? What if this is a homecoming? The old director's mandibles stopped clicking. His 4 eyes went wide with terror as he understood what she meant. The humans hadn't just survived their exile, they had grown stronger, smarter, and more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. And now they were back. Within just a few hours of the shocking battle with the human ships, every important leader in the galaxy was rushing to an emergency meeting. The Great Assembly Hall on Nexus Prime had never seen anything like it. Representatives from 12 different alien species all arriving at the same time, their faces showing fear, confusion, and anger. The massive hall was filled with the sound of dozens of different languages as creatures with scales, fur, tentacles, and stranger things argued with each other. Some had multiple arms, others had eyes on stalks, and a few didn't even look like anything from Earth's nightmares. But they all had one thing in common: they were terrified. Chancellor Mordak, a tall creature with grey skin and a voice like thunder, had to bang his ceremonial hammer against the stone podium over and over again to get everyone's attention. "Order, order," he shouted. "Everyone sit down and be quiet. We need to hear what Intelligence Director Quintar has discovered." The old Nexari director walked slowly to the speaking platform in the center of the hall. His data pad was shaking in his 6-fingered hands, and his 4 eyes were darting around nervously. He looked like someone who had just seen a ghost. "Honored representatives," he began, his voice cracking slightly. "We are facing something that has never happened before in the entire history of our galaxy. The species that just destroyed 3 Zephyrian warships in 30 seconds, they're not unknown aliens from some distant star system. They are humans, and they're coming home after being gone for 800 years. The hall erupted in shocked whispers and gasps. Some representatives stood up from their seats, while others started talking frantically to their assistants. "The implications of this are extremely troubling," Director Quintar continued, waiting for the noise to die down. "Our analysis of the battle suggests that what we witnessed wasn't an exploration mission or a group of refugees looking for a new home. Those 12 ships were scouts. They were testing us, seeing how we would react, learning about our military capabilities." Ambassador Keithara, a blue-skinned creature with silver hair representing the Vorthan Commonwealth, stood up from her seat. "Are you telling us that they've been watching us? Spying on us?" "It's worse than that," the director replied grimly. "The technology they used in that battle, ships that can move through time, weapons that can cut through our strongest armor like paper, hulls that can change shape in seconds, none of this existed when the humans left our galaxy 8 centuries ago. They've had 800 years to develop their technology in complete isolation, without any of the political problems and trade disputes that have slowed down our own progress." The entire assembly hall fell completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop as every representative tried to process what they had just heard. Representative Zex Ani of the Trade Federation, a creature that looked like a cross between an octopus and a businessman, called out from his seat. "Director, how many ships did the humans have when they originally left our galaxy?" Quintar checked his data pad with trembling fingers. "The conservative estimates suggest they left with somewhere between 10,000 and 50,000 vessels. But remember, that was 8 centuries ago. If they've continued to build ships and expand their population at the same rate they were growing before they left..." He didn't need to finish his sentence. Every alien in that room could do the math in their heads. If the humans had started with tens of thousands of ships and had been building more for 800 years, they could return with millions of vessels. Chancellor Mordak's voice was so quiet that everyone had to strain to hear him. "How much time do we have before they come back with their main fleet?" Director Quintar looked at the battle recordings one more time. "Based on how quickly and efficiently those 12 ships handled our forces, and considering that they were obviously just testing us, I estimate we have maybe days, possibly a few weeks at most." The Chancellor closed his eyes and whispered words that chilled everyone present. "Then may the ancient gods help us all, because I don't think anything else can." At the very edge of the galaxy, where the last stars faded into the endless darkness of empty space, something impossible began to happen. The deep space monitoring stations that watched for threats from beyond suddenly started picking up readings that made no sense. Massive gravitational distortions were appearing out of nowhere, like invisible mountains materializing in the void. The sensors were going crazy, detecting energy signatures so powerful that the monitoring equipment kept overloading and shutting down. Whatever was out there was bigger than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Then, from the darkness between galaxies, they came. First one ship appeared, then 10, then hundreds. These weren't the small weathered vessels that Captain Li Hyun had commanded. These were massive warships that dwarfed even the largest alien dreadnoughts. Each one was a floating city of metal and technology, stretching for kilometers through space like metallic mountains. The lead ship was so enormous that it defied belief. 20 kilometers from front to back, its hull gleamed with a silvery perfection that spoke of centuries of advanced engineering. This wasn't just a warship. It was a statement of power, a declaration that humanity had not just survived their exile, but had grown into something far beyond what they had been before. On the bridge of this flagship, called the Endless Horizon, Admiral Kim Da-bin stood looking at the tactical displays, showing her fleet's arrival. She was a woman in her 50s, with short grey hair and the kind of calm confidence that came from decades of command experience. Behind her, dozens of crew members worked at stations that hummed with technology the rest of the galaxy couldn't. "Haven dream of, ma'am," said Intelligence Officer Young Se-jin, looking up from his computer console. "Captain Lee's scouting mission has been completed successfully. The Galactic Council's military capabilities are exactly as weak as our long-range observations suggested they would be." Admiral Kim nodded slowly. "And how did they respond when we offered them peace?" "They opened fire immediately, ma'am. No negotiation, no attempt at diplomacy. They just started shooting." A small, cold smile appeared on the Admiral's face. "Then, they've made their choice about how this is going to go. Open communication channels to every frequency in the galaxy. I want everyone to hear this." The bridge became completely quiet as the Admiral prepared to address an entire galaxy that had forgotten humanity even existed. "Attention, Galactic Council," she began, her voice carrying across space to reach every inhabited planet, every space station, every ship. "This is Admiral Kim Da-bin of the Terran Hegemony 1st Expeditionary Force. We are the children of Earth, and we have come home to the galaxy where we were born." Her words reached billions of alien ears across thousands of worlds. 800 years ago, your ancestors watched as we fled from our dying planets. We asked for nothing but safe passage as we tried to rebuild our civilization in the empty space beyond your borders. The transmission continued, and with each word the scope of humanity's return became clearer. "We have returned in peace, hoping to reclaim our rightful place among the stars, but your forces attacked our diplomatic mission without any provocation. This kind of aggression will not happen again." Captain Li Hyun's voice joined the broadcast from his small ship, the Quiet Dawn. "The Terran Deep Survey Fleet was just our advanced scouting force. We offered you peace. You chose to make war instead." Behind Admiral Kim, the tactical displays showed the true magnitude of what was happening. Not hundreds of ships, but thousands upon thousands of vessels were emerging from the darkness. Each one represented centuries of technological advancement, forced adaptation, and preparation for exactly this moment. "The Terran hegemony has returned," Admiral Kim concluded, her voice carrying a weight that made every alien listener understand that their galaxy had just changed forever. "We are no longer the desperate refugees who fled into exile 800 years ago. We are now your technological superiors, and we demand the respect that any sovereign power deserves. The old galaxy ends today. The new one begins right now. The age of human exile was over. The age of human dominance had begun. 3 months had passed since what everyone now called the return, and the entire galaxy was still trying to figure out what had happened to their carefully ordered world. The Galactic Council, which had ruled space for over 1,000 years, was meeting again in their great assembly hall. But this time, they weren't making decisions. They were accepting terms. Captain Li Hyun walked into the hall wearing a crisp new uniform with different rank insignia. He was no longer just a ship captain. He had been promoted to diplomatic liaison, the official voice of humanity in galactic affairs. Behind him, through the massive windows of the hall, everyone could see those same 12 ships that Admiral HFY had once laughed at. But now they weren't alone. They were escorting a massive diplomatic vessel called the New Earth that was bigger than some space stations. The alien representatives who had once been so confident and arrogant now sat quietly in their seats, avoiding eye contact with the human who stood before them. Many of them remembered laughing at reports of the tiny human fleet. None of them were laughing anymore. The Terran hegemony is prepared to offer the Galactic Council a simple choice, Captain Lee announced, his voice echoing through the silent hall. We can work together as equals, sharing our technology and establishing fair trade relationships, or you can continue to think of us as the primitive refugees that your ancestors once dismissed and ignored. The silence in the hall was deafening. Everyone knew there was really only one choice to make. Chancellor Mordak, the same alien leader who had hoped the ancient gods would save them, slowly stood up. His voice sounded tired and defeated as he spoke. The Galactic Council formally recognizes the Terran hegemony as a sovereign power with full rights to the following star systems. The list he read included some of the most important and valuable territories in the entire galaxy. Key trade routes, systems rich in rare minerals, and strategic locations that controlled major shipping lanes. These weren't systems that the Council was giving to humanity as gifts. These were territories that the humans had simply taken during their return, and the Council was now officially admitting they couldn't stop them. In the weeks and months that followed, the true extent of humanity's transformation became clear to everyone. The humans hadn't just managed to survive their 800-year exile in the empty space between galaxies. They had become something incredible. The technologies they shared with alien species who were willing to cooperate with them completely revolutionized medicine, making diseases that had plagued civilizations for centuries suddenly curable. Their space travel technology made ships faster and safer than ever before. Their communication systems allowed instant contact across vast distances that had never been possible. But species that tried to oppose the humans or challenge their authority quickly discovered that their military fleets were hopelessly outmatched. Human weapons and defenses were so advanced that alien military experts couldn't even understand how they worked. The 12 ships that Admiral HFY had once mocked as a tiny fleet became a symbol that every child in the galaxy would learn about in school. Those 12 small vessels had announced the return of a civilization that had spent 8 centuries getting ready for exactly this moment. Back on the bridge of the Quiet Dawn, Captain Lee Hyun was reading reports from all across the galaxy on his computer screen. Former enemies were now sending messages requesting alliances. Trade agreements were flooding in from alien species who desperately wanted access to human technology. The entire galaxy was rapidly adapting to its new reality. "Sir," Communications Officer Kim Tae-ho said, looking up from his station with a slight smile, "we're getting a transmission from the Zephyrian Empire. They want to establish formal diplomatic relations with us." Captain Lee smiled back, remembering Admiral HFY's arrogant laughter just a few months ago. "You know what they say, sometimes the smallest key really can open the biggest door. Accept their request, but make sure to remind them of something important. We came to them in peace and they chose to start a war. They should consider themselves very lucky that we chose to show mercy instead of revenge." As the Quiet Dawn continued its patrol through space that now belonged to humanity, the galaxy settled into its new order. The age of human exile was finally over. The age of the Terran hegemony had begun.